Burgess was asked on Surviving the Survivor podcast whether the suspect might be a stalker type, someone obsessed with Savannah Guthrie. She paused and then she gave an answer that changes the entire framework of this investigation. She said, "I think this is much more of a personal kind of a crime, that there is some grievance out there that is trying to play itself out. A grievance, not greed, not random violence, not a stranger who saw a wealthy neighborhood and chose a house. A grievance, something that existed before January 31st, something that had been building, something that this crime was designed to express." And then she said something else. She said money has to come in at some level. But she added a phrase that has been almost entirely ignored by every channel covering this case. She said, "Unless it was staged to throw everybody off?" Staged. That is not a word Dr. Ann Burgess uses lightly. Staged means deliberate misdirection. It means someone constructed the appearance of a financially motivated kidnapping in order to point investigators away from the real motive. It means the ransom notes, the Bitcoin demands, the cryptocurrency angle, all of it may have been theater designed to make investigators chase a financial motive while the actual reason for this crime remained hidden. If Burgess is right about that, and this is clearly labeled as her professional assessment, not confirmed fact, then this investigation has been operating inside a constructed narrative from the beginning, chasing a motive that was placed there intentionally, and the real motive is somewhere else. She told us where to look, she said, who in her orbit, that could be family, could be friends, would be hurt the most, not who had a reason to target Nancy, who had a reason to use Nancy as a weapon against someone else. An 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker and no overnight caretaker living alone in a quiet neighborhood is not a natural target for organized criminal networks seeking cryptocurrency. Her daughter's wealth is not directly accessible through her. You cannot threaten an elderly woman until she gives you access to her daughter's financial accounts. It does not work that way. So if the financial motive does not fully hold, and Burgess is suggesting it may not, then why Nancy? Because of who she is to someone else. Savannah Guthrie goes on national television every single morning. She sits at a desk and looks into a camera and speaks to millions of people. And somewhere behind that composure, behind the professionalism of 20 years in broadcast journalism, she is carrying what may be the heaviest thing a person can carry. Her mother is gone and she does not know what happened to her. Burgess said the kidnapper may have been trying to get back at someone else in Guthrie's world. She said it is a very mean, angry, horrible thing to do. The word she used was mean, not efficient, not calculated in the way a financial crime is calculated. Mean, that is the language of a personal grievance, of something that was designed to cause maximum pain to a specific person, of someone who looked at the people around Savannah Guthrie and chose the one whose loss would be most unbearable, her mother. And Burgess said, "And you can answer who would be hurt the most." She did not say the name out loud. She did not need to. Every person watching knew the answer before she finished the sentence. Now, let me bring in the other expert who sat in that same documentary and what his analysis adds to Burgess's. Dr. Gary Burkado is a criminal psychologist who appeared alongside Burgess in the News Nation special, and he extended her spiderweb concept into a specific investigative framework. He said if Porch Guy is caught, if he is alive and is caught, he will lead down the spiderweb to the center, suggesting others may be connected. Referencing a possible orchestrator behind the scenes, spiderweb to the center. If the center of this crime is not financial but personal, then the center is somewhere in the human relationships around Nancy Guthrie, someone who has a grievance against someone in her orbit, someone who watched closely enough to know her routine, her schedule, her vulnerabilities, her nighttime rituals, someone who knew she removed her hearing aids before bed, someone who knew the camera system was not reliably recording. That level of knowledge does not come from a dark web search. It does not come from a Coinbase data breach or a financial profile scraped from a celebrity net worth website. It comes from proximity, from time spent, from access to information that only circles inward from a person's immediate life. And Bricado made one more point that directly connects to Burgess's assessment. He said, the crime scene and the suspect's behavior both point towards someone who is comfortable with the operation. Too comfortable, not nervous, not rushing, not behaving like someone who feared getting caught. Burgess had said the same thing. She described the suspect's demeanor in the footage as showing coolness under pressure, traits consistent with someone who planned the act out of personal motive, or someone who had been told exactly what to do and had reason to believe it would work. That kind of calm at 2 in the morning at the front door of a home in a dark and quiet neighborhood does not come from random opportunity. It comes from certainty. Certainty that the plan had been designed correctly. Certainty that the information they had was accurate. Certainty that they were at the right place at the right time because someone had made sure they would be. Now here is the final piece of what Burgess said, and it is the most disturbing. Brian Enton, sitting in the News Nation special, summarized what had been building through the conversation. He said, so the person we see at the front door could be dead, killed by someone else, killed by the boss. Burgess's answer was immediate. Right by the boss, right? It was well planned. They got away with it, and they form a type of case that we've never seen before as far as we know. A type of case we have never seen before. 50 years of working the most complex criminal cases in the country. And she is saying this is something new. Think about what that means. Not new as in unique. New as in the operational structure, the chain of command, the way information was gathered and weaponized, and then the evidence cleaned up afterward. All of it was designed in a way that even experienced profilers had not encountered in quite this combination before. Planned well enough that porch guy, whose face is on camera and whose wrist may carry a visible tattoo, has not been publicly identified after more than 100 days. Well enough that the person or people above porch guy have generated no trail that the FBI has been able to disclose publicly. And if porch guy is dead, which Burgess says is possible, consistent with certain types of organized criminal operations, then the trail that leads from the front door to whoever orchestrated this has one fewer link in it, one fewer person who can talk, one fewer person who could lead investigators toward the center of the spiderweb. Burgess also said something that has received almost no coverage at all. She said the suspect is probably watching the podcast, watching the coverage, following every development, monitoring the public reaction. She said he can enjoy it vicariously. Whoever did this is out there right now reading the articles, watching the videos, tracking exactly how close investigators are getting, knowing things about this case that no one else knows, and watching the world search. That image of someone sitting somewhere watching Savannah Guthrie go on television every morning, watching the coverage of her mother's disappearance, watching the theories and the profiles and the expert analyses and knowing exactly what happened, knowing exactly where Nancy is, knowing what really motivated all of it. That image should make every person watching this video deeply uncomfortable because it means the answer to this case is not in a laboratory. It is not in a DNA database. It is not in a Walmart purchase record. It is inside a person who is watching and waiting. Let me now address the thing that Burgess herself said investigators are failing to do. She said the FBI should be releasing more information. She believes the Bureau is holding back too much from the public. And in a case where the public's eyes and ears may be the most powerful investigative tool available, withholding information has a cost. The crime scene itself was released back to the family within days of the disappearance. Dr. Casey Jordan, appearing on the same program, said something that echoes what Burgess implied. She said, "It is very possible that a lot of what we needed to know was bungled by releasing the crime scene back to the family within days. A crime scene that was released too quickly to a family that law enforcement had to spend weeks subsequently clearing in a case where physical evidence, trace materials, microscopic transfers, biological material that degrades with time and handling is the primary path to identification." Burgess did not accuse anyone of doing this deliberately. She is not making accusations. She is identifying gaps in what has been done and what has been publicly shared. Gaps that an experienced investigator recognizes as places where the case could have been stronger. And here is what she believes about the motive for those gaps, at least at the law enforcement level. She said the FBI should be releasing more information to help the public help them. She believes there are things investigators know that would accelerate the identification of the suspect if more people were aware of them. Details, physical identifiers, behavioral patterns, the kind of information that causes someone who knows the suspect to suddenly recognize what they have been looking at. Because here is the reality of how cases like this break. Not with a single forensic breakthrough, not with a confession, not with a tip from someone who was present at the crime. They break when someone who knows the suspect in ordinary life, a neighbor, a coworker, a family member, a former acquaintance, sees enough specific detail to recognize something and picks up the phone. That recognition requires information in the public domain. And Burgess is saying there is information still sitting in the Bureau that has not been shared. She is asking them to share it. So let me put every piece of what Burgess said into one coherent picture. She walked through the behavioral evidence. She looked at how this person stood at that door, how they moved, how they interacted with the space, and she concluded this was not random. It was purposeful. The suspect expected the door to be opened from the inside. The crime was personal in nature, driven by grievance. Nancy Guthrie may not have been the true target. The true target may be someone whose loss of Nancy would cause maximum pain. The financial motive may have been staged to misdirect investigators. Something went very wrong inside that house. Porch guy may be dead, eliminated to protect whoever is above him in the chain. The person responsible is watching the coverage right now, and the FBI is holding back information that could help the public help them. Every one of those assessments comes from the same person, the woman who sat across from Ted Bundy, who built the profiling methodology the FBI still uses today, who spent 50 years learning how the worst kinds of people think. This is not a theory assembled from internet posts. This is a professional framework built from half a century of experience applied to one specific case, and not a single major outlet has reported all of it together in sequence. the way it actually builds until now. Nancy Guthrie's background contains nothing by Burgess's own account that would make her a prime target on her own terms. She is not a wealthy woman in the sense that makes people targets for financial crimes. She is not a public figure in the sense that creates enemies. She is an 84-year-old woman who went to church live streams on Sunday mornings with a small group of close friends, who had dinner with her family, who took her medication every night and her hearing aids out and trusted that her home was safe. She was not targeted for what she is. She was targeted for what she represents to someone else. And the someone else, the actual target of whatever grievance is at the center of this, has been on national television every morning since March 5, 2026. When Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show desk, Savannah has said publicly that she believes her mother is still out there. She has asked the public repeatedly not to give up. She has maintained a composure in front of a camera that most people could not find under the weight of what she is carrying. Burgess said it a very mean, angry, horrible thing to do. That is the language of someone who looked at this case through the lens of 50 years of studying human cruelty and found that the most accurate word she could apply to the motive behind it was mean. Not sophisticated, not financially motivated, not professionally executed, mean. Someone used a woman's 84-year-old mother to hurt her. That is what Burgess is saying. Whether or not the financial angle was real or staged, underneath it is something that Burgess calls personal. A grievance, a score being settled, a message being sent to someone who wakes up every morning and sits at a television desk and tries to do her job while not knowing where her mother is. That is what the FBI is trying to find the center of. That is what the DNA at Quantico may eventually identify. That is what 50,000 tips and 1,000 hours of surveillance footage and genetic genealogy technology and cryptocurrency forensics are all working toward. Not just who walked up to that door, who sent them, and why. If you have any information, anything at all, call 1800-KL-FBI. The reward is $1.2 million. It has not been claimed. And the person who can claim it may already know the most important piece of information in this entire case. Watch the footage one more time. Not the part everyone focuses on. Not the branch being stuffed in front of the lens. Not the flashlight clenched in his mouth. Not the gloved hand covering the camera. Watch what he does before all of that. He walks up to the front door. He stands there and he waits. He does not try to break the door down. He does not go to a window. He does not look for another way in. He stands at the front door of an 84-year-old woman's home at 2 in the morning and he waits. Nobody has asked why. Because if you are there to break into a house, you do not wait at the front door. You do not ring the bell. You do not stand in plain view of a camera and give it time to record you before you eventually decide to cover the lens. You go around the side. You find a window. You do what experienced criminals do when they want to get inside without being seen. This man did none of those things. He walked up to the front door and he stood there. This week, Dr. Ann Burgess, the woman who helped build the FBI's entire approach to criminal profiling, the woman whose work inspired Netflix's Mindhunter, the woman who has spent 50 years studying why people do the worst things imaginable, looked at that behavior and she said something that nobody in this case has said clearly on camera. She said, "The behavior here suggests the offender may have wanted the victim to open the door voluntarily. He was waiting for Nancy to let him in. And if that is true, if that single behavioral observation is correct, then everything we think we know about who is behind this case and why shifts completely." That is what this video is, and it is the most important thing said about this investigation in weeks. Before we go any further, you need to understand who Dr. Ann Burgess is. Not her title, not her resume, what she actually did. In 1977, a young FBI agent named Robert Ressler asked Burgess to help him with something the Bureau had never done before. He wanted to interview serial killers, not to prosecute them, to understand them, to get inside the way they thought, the way they selected victims, the way they planned crimes that investigators could not figure out. Burgess agreed. She and Ressler and Douglas, the real John Douglas, the man behind the fictional character in Mindhunter, drove across the country and sat down with the most dangerous people in American prisons. Ed Kemper, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy. They asked questions nobody had asked before. They listened to things most people would not be able to sit through. And out of those conversations came the foundation of modern criminal profiling, the behavioral science that the FBI still uses today. The methodology that has helped investigators understand, locate, and convict people who would otherwise have remained invisible. Burgess built that. She is not a television personality who studied crime. She is one of the people who created the science that solves it. When she walks through the behavioral evidence in a case, she is not guessing. She is applying 50 years of direct work with the most sophisticated criminal minds this country has ever produced. And when she sat down on Brian Enton's News Nation program in April 2026 and again on the News Nation documentary special in May and said what she said about the Nancy Guthrie case, every word carried the weight of that entire career behind it. So when she said the offender may have wanted the door open voluntarily, That is not speculation from someone who has been watching YouTube videos. That is a trained observation from a woman who has spent half a century decoding exactly this kind of behavior. Now let us follow what she actually saw. Start with what is confirmed. The doorbell camera was disabled at 1:47 in the morning. A motion sensor detected a presence inside or near the property at 2:12. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnected from her phone at 2:28. 41 minutes from camera going dark to pacemaker going silent. And inside that window, somewhere between 2:12 and 2:28, a 16-minute period that no investigator has publicly explained. When Burgess looked at the footage that was recovered and released by the FBI, the footage showing the masked figure at the front door, she said something that stopped the conversation cold. She said, "I think something went very wrong inside the house because you know there was blood." Think about that phrase, very wrong. Not wrong the way plans go wrong when you are caught. Very wrong the way something goes wrong when a person is not supposed to get hurt, and they do anyway. Blood was found on Nancy Guthrie's front porch, confirmed by Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, confirmed as a DNA match to Nancy, and that blood was on the exterior of the home on the stone steps. But Burgess pointed to something that almost no coverage has addressed. She asked where the blood trail goes. She said it vanishes. She just vanishes. No blood trail leading away from the property in a direction investigators have publicly disclosed. No blood found along a path that would show where Nancy went after those front steps. The drops are there and then they stop and she is gone. What does a trained profiler read in that absence? She read it as confirmation that something went wrong before or during the moment Nancy was moved, not after. Before. Whatever happened to Nancy happened there on or near those steps, and the absence of a continuing trail suggests she was not walking when she left the property. She was carried. Jim Clemente, a retired FBI supervisory special agent and profiler who analyzed the blood evidence separately, concluded the same thing. He said, "Where the blood trail disappears, he believes Nancy was picked up and carried to a vehicle unconscious or close to it. So by the time that pacemaker disconnected at 2:28, Nancy Guthrie was not walking. She was not being led. She was being transported. And whatever caused the blood on those steps happened before the transport began. Now bring back the door. Here is what Burgess said about the suspect's behavior at the entrance. And here is why it matters more than anything else anyone has said about this case in weeks. She said it does not appear to be random behavior. The individual seems to have a purpose for being there. That single sentence eliminates an entire category of suspect. Random criminals do not drive to a specific house in a specific quiet neighborhood and stand at a specific front door with a specific weapon and a specific backpack. Random criminals do not disable a specific camera at a specific time and then stand and wait. This person had a purpose, a reason, a destination. And then Burgess went further. She said, "The behavior here suggests the offender may have wanted the victim to open the door voluntarily rather than forcing entry." She said, "If someone intends to break into a home, there are simpler methods." Read that sentence one more time. If someone intends to break into a home, there are simpler methods. He was not trying to break in. He was waiting to be let in. Former FBI agent Chris Gruing analyzed the same footage and came to almost the identical conclusion through a different pathway. He asked on Fox News whether the suspect had pressed the Ring doorbell, whether he was trying to get Nancy to come to the door. He asked whether the suspect was shielding himself from the camera so that Nancy in her confusion might open the door without seeing who was there. And he said, "If that is the case, this suspect was not there to rob the home. He was there because of something personal." Former FBI criminal profiler Dr. Mary Ellen O'Toole made the same observation from the same footage on a different program. She said the suspect appeared comfortable on that porch, that he seemed used to having been there before, that his behavior did not match someone who was in an unfamiliar space. 3 separate trained professionals, 3 separate analyses, all pointing at the same behavioral signature. The man at that door had been near that house before. He expected Nancy to open the door. He was not a stranger who arrived at random and found an opportunity. He was someone or someone sent by someone who knew exactly where they were going and expected to be received. Now here is where Burgess said the thing that nobody is reporting. She suggested that we need to stop looking at the porch guy as a criminal entity and start looking at him as a piece of equipment, a tool that was used, likely discarded, and perhaps already neutralized. If we follow the logic that this was a targeted, personal, and meticulously planned operation, then the person on the camera is merely an expendable asset. Think about the sheer logistics of what we are discussing. To orchestrate a kidnapping that appears financially motivated, using cryptocurrency demands and staged ransom notes, while the true objective is to cause deep psychological agony to a high-profile figure like Savannah Guthrie, requires a level of planning that is frankly terrifying. This is not the work of a lone wolf. This is the work of a handler. Burgess hinted that the boss, or the orchestrator, is someone who possesses a profound, perhaps even pathological, understanding of human psychology. They understood that the most efficient way to inflict maximum pain is not through direct attack, but through the destruction of someone's peace, their safety, and their sense of home. The fact that the FBI released the crime scene back to the family so quickly remains a point of contention for many observers, including experts like Dr. Casey Jordan. When you have a scene where the primary evidence is biological, a few drops of blood on stone, every second that passes and every person who walks through that space degrades the integrity of the scene. If that scene was compromised early on, it might explain why, after 100 days, the physical evidence trail has gone cold. But Burgess argues that even if the physical scene was bungled, the behavioral evidence is still there, locked in the footage. The behavioral evidence does not degrade. The way he waited, the way he stood, the way he expected the door to open, these are immutable facts of the encounter. This brings us back to the most chilling aspect of the entire situation, the audience. Burgess posits that the perpetrator is not hiding in the shadows, disconnected from the world. No, this person is a consumer of the tragedy. They are watching the morning news. They are analyzing the reactions of the family. They are gauging the effectiveness of their message. This means the investigation is not just a hunt for a kidnapper. It is a game of cat and mouse being played in the public eye. Every time a new theory is proposed, every time a new piece of evidence is discussed by an anchor, the perpetrator is evaluating that data. They are adjusting their own narrative, ensuring that the misdirection remains effective. We have to ask, who has the motive, the resources, and the cold-blooded detachment to execute such a maneuver? We aren't looking for a common thief. We are looking for someone who harbors a resentment so deep it has calcified into a desire for total destruction. Someone who viewed Nancy Guthrie not as a human being, but as a lever. By pulling that lever, they have managed to hold a national figure hostage in her own grief. This is a unique form of terrorism, one that exploits the vulnerability of a public figure's private life. The failure to identify the suspect, even with the advanced tools of modern forensics, points toward a level of sophistication that is rare. If the porch guy has been silenced, it leaves investigators with a vacuum. They have the video, but they don't have the person. They have the time, but they don't have the motive. They have the victim, but they don't have the location. And this is exactly where the orchestrator wants them, in a state of perpetual searching. Burgess has laid out a roadmap. She has moved the goalpost from random kidnapping to targeted psychological operation. If the FBI and other law enforcement agencies are still treating this as a traditional ransom case, they are fighting the last war. They are looking for financial breadcrumbs while the real trail is paved with personal grievances, vendettas, and cold, calculated malice. Every single morning as Savannah Guthrie takes her seat, the world watches her professionalism. They admire her strength. But behind the scenes, there is a missing woman who was taken from her own doorstep because she was the most precious thing in her daughter's life. This is not about money. It never was. It is about a score that is being settled in the most cruel way possible. If you are watching this, if you are reading the accounts, remember what Burgess said. The answer is not in a lab. The answer is in the relationships. It is in the history. It is in the secrets that people think are buried, but which are actually driving someone to commit these horrific acts. The person behind this is counting on our confusion. They are counting on us to get distracted by the Bitcoin, by the ransoms, by the porch guy. They want us to keep looking at the surface, while they are at the center of the spiderweb, watching it all unfold. We must shift our perspective. We must look at this not as a crime scene, but as a message that was sent to Savannah Guthrie on the 31st of January, and which has been echoing through our media cycles ever since. It is time to stop asking, who would rob Nancy Guthrie, and start asking, who would want to hurt Savannah Guthrie so deeply that they would destroy her mother? When you ask that question, the suspect pool stops being random and starts being personal. The silence from the FBI, the gaps in the public narrative, and the staged elements of the crime all suggest that we are dealing with an adversary who is playing a game we have not yet learned the rules to. But we have an expert guide in Dr. Ann Burgess. She has seen the worst of humanity, and she has told us what she sees here: an act of cold, calculated, and deeply personal cruelty. It is time for the investigators to listen to the profile, stop chasing the theater of the crime, and start looking for the person who is currently enjoying the show. The reward remains, the clock is ticking, and the person responsible is still out there, waiting for the next update, watching the world try to solve the puzzle they constructed. But they have made a mistake. They have underestimated the power of the truth, and they have underestimated the sheer relentless nature of a public that refuses to forget. We must keep the pressure on, we must keep questioning the narrative, and we must never stop looking for the center of the web. The answer is there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right person to see it for what it truly is: a grievance, a message, a crime of pure, unadulterated malice.